Welcome to this explainer. All right, let's just dive right into this because today we are embarking on an absolutely massive journey across the Southern Hemisphere. We're going to look at three completely different geographical approaches to natural wealth. We've got this incredibly old mining powerhouse, a sprawling network of resource-rich but land-poor islands, and then a literal frozen vault of resources that the whole world has collectively agreed to just not touch. If you want to understand how the raw materials of our modern world are actually sourced, protected, and fought over, well, you are in exactly the right place.
But first, I really want to ask you something. When you hear the word wealth, what does it actually look like to you, right? Most of us instantly picture dollar signs, massive stock markets, or literal gold bars. But I want you to reframe your understanding of wealth entirely for a second, because true global power, the actual engines that drive the entire global economy, they aren't dictated by Wall Street. They are dictated by geography. It's all about what's buried under the dirt, swimming in the ocean, or locked beneath miles of solid ice.
So, here's our itinerary for today. 1. The geography of wealth. 2. Australia, the open mine. 3. Oceania's island economies. 4. Antarctica's frozen vault. And 5. The future of resources.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the geography of wealth, how the Earth distributes riches. So, how exactly does the Earth hand out its riches? Well, the global map of wealth is incredibly uneven, mostly because the Earth just doesn't hand things out fairly. Whether you're a massive continental landmass, a tiny island chain, or an ice-covered wilderness, your geological bank account is determined by three completely unyielding natural factors. First, your geologic age, basically how old and stable your rocks are. Second, your volcanic activity, which is what brings deep Earth minerals all the way up to the surface and creates really rich soils. And third, your climate patterns. These three factors literally dictate exactly what kind of vault you get to be. Moving right along to Section 2, Australia, the open mine, often called the Old Continent. Let's crack open our first vault, which just so happens to be one of the world's absolute leading exporters of raw materials. 95%. Think about that for a second. It's a staggering number. That represents Australia's share of the entire world's precious opals. And honestly, it instantly demonstrates the sheer scale of the continent's mineral dominance. Because of its incredibly old and incredibly stable geology, Australia basically acts as this massive active extraction engine for the entire globe. And the full scope of that extraction engine, it is immense. You've got the traditional heavy hitters, right? Iron ore coming out of the Pilbara region and tons of coal from Queensland and New South Wales. But think about the critical minerals too. Lithium, nickel, rare earth elements. These are the crucial green minerals that are literally powering the smartphone or computer you're using to watch this right now. And hey, on top of all that underground wealth, you have immense surface wealth too. The vast outback provides endless grazing for sheep and cattle, while the arable land in the southeast and southwest pumps out incredible wheat and wine. It's a seriously diverse portfolio.
But, here's the catch. Every engine has a limit. And Australia's ultimate vulnerability is something we take for granted: water. Despite all this massive geological wealth and those vast grazing lands, Australia is a notoriously dry continent. The Great Artesian Basin is this incredibly vital underground water resource, and frankly, without it, managing all that immense agricultural and mining output would be virtually impossible. So water, not gold, is the absolute limiting factor here.
All right, on to Section 3, Oceania. Island economies, wealth defined by the Pacific. We're transitioning now from the super dry, massive Australian continent to a much more vulnerable vault. And international law completely changes how we define size here. When we look at Oceania, regions like Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, we essentially just see tiny specks of land. But thanks to exclusive economic zones, or EEZs, these really small island nations legally control absolutely massive stretches of the ocean floor. This brilliantly empowers them to command incredible marine wealth. We're talking access to some of the world's most productive tuna fisheries. Their wealth is tied directly to the ocean that surrounds them. Now, this contrast in wealth gets even starker when we actually look at the land itself. On one hand, we have high islands. Because of their volcanic activity, places like Papua New Guinea have incredibly rich soil for agriculture. Think cocoa, coffee, and copra, plus some really serious minerals like gold and copper. On the other hand, we have low islands, which are mostly just coral atolls. These guys have very, very limited soil. Their primary resources are heavily restricted to things like coconuts, and they really have to leverage their natural beauty for tourism. It's just a profound difference in terrestrial wealth. But As you might guess, this oceanic vault faces some pretty severe constraints. Historically, some of these islands have paid a massive environmental toll for resource extraction. Just look at the devastating impacts of phosphate mining on the island of Nauru, for example. Plus, a heavy reliance on tourism leaves these economies super fragile to sudden global shifts. But the most pressing constraint by far is the existential threat that rising sea levels pose directly to the physical land area of these low-lying atolls. Because when your land is your absolute most precious resource, the encroaching ocean is an undeniable threat.
Let's move to Section 4, Antarctica, the frozen vault, an untouched reserve.
We're shifting to our third and final vault, and it's an environment fundamentally unlike anywhere else on the planet. Remember how we just talked about Australia being constrained by lack of water? Well, look at this, 70%. That is the amount of the entire world's fresh water locked away right now in the Antarctic ice sheet. Just wrap your head around that for a second. A single frozen continent holds the vast majority of planet Earth's entire freshwater reserve. And beneath all that ice, it's a massive treasure trove. Geological surveys suggest there are enormous deposits of coal and iron ore down there, along with offshore oil and gas. On top of that, you've got incredible biological resources like krill, which are absolutely crucial for global omega-3 oils and literally serve as the foundation for the entire oceanic food chain. It is a staggering amount of wealth. Yet, today, the continent's only primary use is just peaceful scientific research. So why is that? Well, it's because of this, the Madrid Protocol. You see, Antarctica is uniquely managed entirely by international law rather than any single government. And the Madrid Protocol explicitly bans all commercial mining and resource extraction. But pay close attention to that phrasing at the very end of the rule, until at least 2048. Tick-tock, right? The immense wealth of this frozen vault is strictly protected right now, but there is a very real, looming deadline on the horizon. Let's bring it all together in Section 5, the future of resources, global impact, and trade-offs. Let's zoom out a bit and connect these three distinct vaults to the global economy, and really to your daily life. All of these regions build into one massive, interconnected global supply chain. Step 1, raw materials get extracted from powerhouse economies like Australia and high island nations like Papua New Guinea. Step 2, these materials rely on massive export markets, with places like China and Japan serving as the primary customers. And Step 3, these materials, specifically critical minerals like lithium, are fundamentally fueling the global transition from fossil fuels to green technology. So the battery in your electric car or the smartphone in your pocket, it highly likely started its life in one of these geographic vaults. But as global demand keeps skyrocketing, managing these vaults means navigating some really complex sustainability challenges. It's a constant, delicate balancing act. Like, how do you balance the massive economic gains of mining with the absolutely necessary protection of fragile ecosystems like the Great Barrier Reef? How do nations respect indigenous lands while still trying to access critical subterranean wealth? And how do these heavily mining-dependent economies successfully navigate the massive global shift from exporting coal to extracting lithium? It's a tightly woven web of economics and geography, and there are absolutely no easy answers.
So, to quickly summarize our entire journey today, Australia is the active vault, super rich in minerals for global export, but heavily constrained by water scarcity. Oceania is the vulnerable vault, rich in marine life and tourism, but severely constrained by its tiny land area. And Antarctica is the time-locked vault, holding immense freshwater and potential minerals, but constrained entirely by an international ban on mining.
Which brings us to a close, and honestly leaves us with this final provocative thought. As resource demands for critical minerals and fresh water just continue to skyrocket globally, the pressure on all three of these regions is going to intensify. But looking specifically at the bottom of the world, when the Madrid Protocol comes up for review in 2048 and the whole world looks at that untouched wealth sitting right beneath the ice, are we really going to leave the vault locked?